Despite us living in a world where football fans constantly complain that footballers have become devoid of any personality and that beautiful football has died, just a few months ago Richarlison was being destroyed by the media over showboating. And with just a couple of minutes on any social media platform, you could find 100 fans saying he wasn't any good, that he was overrated, overpriced, and some much more hurtful words. So, when he got picked to play for Brazil at the World Cup alongside Neymar, Vinicius Jr., Rafinha, Antony, Rodrigo, Gabriel Jesus and Martinelli, nobody was betting on Richarlison to be the man of the match at their opening game, or to score the goal of the tournament, or even to be the team's top goal scorer, being involved in damn near every goal they've scored. The thing is, inside the pitch, he completely forgets those people even exist. It's all about him. His entire life led up to that one moment where he finally got to put on that yellow shirt, to stand alongside his childhood idol Neymar, to score that first goal, to play in the Premier League. These little adversities mean nothing when compared to what he already went through. Well, let me tell you his story and you'll see what I mean. At the age of 7, his parents divorced. The kids all stayed with their mom, and despite working all day, she could barely afford to put food on the table. At 11, Richarlison himself was doing all he could to help her. He sold ice cream in the streets to tourists, he sold homemade chocolates, he worked in a car wash, he even worked in a farm harvesting coffee beans. It was horrible, nothing that a kid should be doing, but it was still much better than the alternative. All of his friends were already working as mules for drug lords. They thought he was an idiot, killing himself for a bit of change at the end of the day. They told him, "Come sell with us, you could make so much more money." But he never budged, not once. Richarlison knew what was bound to happen to one of those kids, and he wanted no part of it. But unfortunately, in a place like his hometown, sometimes you don't get a choice. One night, as he left the football pitch with one of his friends after some extra practice, two men stopped them in the street, and one of them pointed a gun at them. They started yelling out at the two kids that they were never going to sell in their street again. Richarlison pleaded for his life, telling them it had been a mistake, that he had never sold any drugs in his entire life, but they didn't believe them. He watched as the guy's finger loosely held the trigger and thought soon his life would come to an end, but for some reason, they just let them run away. Seeing how his father seemingly abandoned him and his brothers in the middle of all of this, you could easily come to the conclusion that he was the true villain of this story. But that wasn't the case. Just listen to this. Over his teenage years, he had been all over Brazil trying to get a real chance at some football club, but it never worked out. One time he traveled over 1,000 miles all by himself, bringing with him only a pair of boots someone had loaned to him, and stayed over at that city for a full month just to try out for a team. And at the very end, they had to pick 2 kids out of a group of 9, and he still wasn't picked. To make things worse, the day he was told to go back was the day of his 16th birthday. As you might imagine, after something like that, Richarlison accepted that maybe football wasn't in the cards for him. And though he kept playing at a local club, it wasn't until the age of 17 that everything changed. Ever since the divorce, his father had been working in a ranch all alone in the countryside. His mental state had deteriorated immensely, so Richarlison would pay him visits with his cousins in order to cheer him up, and one time, they all went fishing in the property. The landowner had told them they could only fish in 2 out of the 3 ponds in the ranch. After hours of fishing, they had seen no fish, but it didn't matter, they were having fun. Regardless, on the way out as a joke, Richarlison casted his fishing rod into the 3rd pond, and in a matter of seconds, he got a bite. As he tried to reel it in, the landowner saw them and began berating his father, telling him that he could have him out on the street any day, that he was a nobody, and a bunch of other vile things. Once he was gone, Richarlison looked at his father once and saw a broken man completely humiliated, and it was at that moment that he decided that he had to get his dad out of there, and the only way he could do that was by making it as a football player. That day, that goal stopped being a dream and became an obsession. Richarlison saved the money for a bus ticket to Belo Horizonte and traveled all the way there to go on trial at the América Mineiro. But by the time he got there, he was so hungry, he spent the money he had for the return ticket to get himself some food. Richarlison had no way to get back home. The only way to come back was with a contract in his hand. And rightfully, after playing 4 matches in a tournament over the afternoon, they signed him. Over the next few months, Richarlison started creating goals out of thin air, and suddenly he had made the América Mineiro under-17 champions for the first time in 17 years, even making sure to score a screamer in the final that ended up warranting him a move to the first team. He debuted against Mojimedin, where a 43-year-old Rivaldo and his teenage son both played, and after just 10 minutes on the pitch, he scored his first goal. And then, they just kept coming. Richarlison was so clearly above everyone's level at the Brazilian second tier that after just 5 matches, Nike had sponsored him. Let me tell you that it's not a thing that just happens. Regardless, Nike's bet on the young man proved more than fruitful, as he ended up winning the league with America, taking them to the first tier of Brazilian football for only the second time in 15 years, which led Fluminense to take a gamble on him, paying 2.5 million euros for only 50% of his rights. A transfer that allowed him to finally buy his father a house so he could leave the ranch, but also one that was highly questioned by the supporters, especially after Richarlison broke one of his toes in training and was forced to go into surgery before even debuting for the club. Regardless, once he got back, he began earning more and more game time, and by his second season he had gone on to score 7 and assist a further 6 in just a bit over 1500 minutes, as well as an additional 8 goals in just 12 matches in the Carioca Championship. These performances had been enough to show everyone in the country that he had the makings of greatness in him, and apparently, those news had made it all the way to the Netherlands as Ajax came after the player before the season had even ended. It was an incredible opportunity. They had talked for months, and it was only a matter of Richarlison saying yes, and he could have joined the team who the following season would go on to surprise Europe with a magical run all the way up until the Champions League semi-finals. But it was right then that Watford came in with the offer. I know, it's just Watford, and actually they were even offering less money than Ajax, but Richarlison had grown up dreaming of playing in the Premier League, going over to his uncle's house any chance he could so he could watch what he thought was the best league in the world, so against all logic, he took their offer instead. With Brazilian players having a shocking track record in the Premier League, many thought Richarlison would crumble under the pressure, and in fact, he didn't speak a word of English. On the coldest days he quite literally couldn't feel his feet while training, and the worst of all, he struggled so much to find food he enjoyed that he ended up losing 5 kilos in just 2 weeks. But still, as he said it himself, I felt no pressure, just happiness. The problems were outside the pitch. Sitting in the tunnel next to Agüero and De Bruyne, I was smiling like a child. These were the guys I played with in my video games. Still, as starstruck as he was there, it would not compare to what came next. He started his season at Watford with 5 goals and 3 assists by November, which led them to their best ever start to a Premier League season. But then, Everton, who were in complete chaos, tempted Watford with a £10 million offer for their coach Marco Silva, hoping he could perform a bit of that same magic with them, but the club rejected every single one of their attempts, which infuriated the coach, who saw this move as the perfect next step in his career and sent the locker room into complete disarray, taking Watford from 15 points in 8 matches to just 11 in the next 15, eventually culminating in the sacking of Marco Silva, to the great dismay of Richarlison, who even tweeted an angry emoji without any context once the news broke out, and went on to completely blank the rest of the season, getting 0 goals and just 1 assist over the next 6 months. Still, as rough as that sounds, who could blame him? Watford won just 6 matches over that period, and still, those 9 goal contributions would leave him only behind Doucouré among the entire squad. In fact, he's still impressed enough that everyone from Arsenal to Chelsea or even Tottenham all fought for him, although ultimately it was Marco Silva that ended up getting the player, as he made Richarlison his main priority after he finally managed to sign for Everton, paying a club record 45 million euros for him, which prompted his first ever call-up to the national team, where he would get the number 9 jersey worn by Ronaldo Nazário himself and a chance to play alongside his childhood idol Neymar. Richarlison had been obsessed with him for years. As he said himself, I had a few football jerseys when I was younger, Ibra, Drogba, but the one I loved the most was his. I even got the same haircut as him back then, you know, the blonde mohawk. When I told him that, he nearly passed out from laughing so hard. But again, Richarlison didn't seem to feel the pressure, and right on his second game he was scoring a brace in 54 minutes, outshining even Neymar, which would eventually become the new normal. Regardless, with Marco Silva going on such a huge gamble for his signing, Richarlison had a task to complete at Everton, and he did not compromise. Opening the season with 3 goals in 2 matches and eventually closing it out with 2 goals that earned his team surprising wins against Chelsea and Manchester United, making Richarlison Everton's top scorer on his debut season and earning him not only the award of Young Player of the Year, but also a call-up to the 2019 Copa America where, despite his minor cameo, he would manage to leave his mark in the tournament after Dani Alves allowed him to convert a penalty in the dying minutes of the final, further securing the win and of course his first ever international title. Back at Everton, as good as Richarlison could be, even scoring in 3 consecutive matches versus Leicester, Liverpool and Chelsea was not enough to save Marco Silva from getting the sack, which prompted the arrival of Ancelotti. If Richarlison was already criticized for not scoring enough, with the new coach it all became worse. By the end of that season, Richarlison's partnership with Calvert-Lewin was hitting cruising speed. He had been named as the club's Player of the Year, and Ancelotti had claimed he saw Richarlison as a player who should be scoring 30 goals a year, and yet his tally had only gone up by 1 goal, now at 15. The next season he showed some promise, starting with 4 goals and 2 assists in just the month of September, but then, besides a good streak around February, he barely scored. By the end of the season his frustration was obvious. On the pitch, he punched the ground, and outside of it, he posted cryptic messages on social media that clearly hinted at his unhappiness, but over summer, a lot happened. It all started with the Copa America, where the drama continued, with Richarlison scoring just 1 goal throughout the whole tournament as Brazil came out with a silver medal. But right after that came the Olympics, and perhaps looking for redemption, he pretty much begged Everton to allow him to miss the beginning of the season so he could go, and they eventually accepted. As he prepared for the first match, Dani Alves saw him putting on his shirt. It was Pele's number 10 on the back, and so worried, he asked him, "You know that with that number on your back, you'll have to score, right?" 30 minutes later, there was no reason to worry anymore. Richarlison had already scored a hat-trick against Germany. By the end of the tournament, he had 6 goal contributions in 6 matches, and Brazil had won the gold medal. If at that point Richarlison's 10 goals in 32 caps for Brazil were unimpressive, that would not be the case ever again. Even if at Everton, things seemed to be as chaotic as ever, with the fans booing new coach Benitez whenever he subbed off Richarlison, who would spend 2 months out injured over that period, being forced to settle for his lowest goal tally since arriving at the club, and watching as his market value dropped by nearly 20 million euros, he would begin performing excellently for the national team, scoring 4 goals in the 4 caps he got that year, which was part of what earned him, despite everything going wrong, a 60 million euro move to Tottenham. And even then, with another month-long injury coming his way, complicating his adaptation to his new team, for whom he has only scored in 1 of the 15 matches he played in, he never stopped scoring for the national team. Quite literally. At the current moment, Richarlison has scored 10 goals in the past 9 matches he has played for Brazil, totaling 20 goals in just 27 starts since his debut for the national team. More than any other player in the squad. Yes, even more than Neymar. And of course, with 3 goals in 3 World Cup matches at this point, only Mbappe has scored more than him across the whole tournament, and if once the number 9 shirt was a heavy burden to carry, now only Admir, Careca and Ronaldo have scored more World Cup goals than him while wearing it. So I guess my question to you should be, why does Richarlison perform so much better for his national team, and how far could he take them at the World Cup?